Magic family. So I've got a compilation of long threads by Majestic12 from the beginning of their account. These are mostly from 2018 and some from the start of 2019. A lot of which I haven't covered. I've covered some of the tweets and some of the threads, but not all of this. So this video is a continuation of the series analyzing Majestic12's old tweets and a follow-up to the last video, the 100,000 foot view. So these long threads I couldn't fit into the end of that video because it was getting too long, and they're very interesting. So the difference between the last video was they were mostly shorter tweets from that video that I was reading out. This one is going to be many long threads by Majestic12, 26 actually, and you'll see how good these threads are because they're so coherent. They're not like short tweets where, you know, you don't understand the full picture, but they explaining like this long history of Majestic12 and the bigger picture. So most of these threads were selected explaining the bigger picture, and just like in the first video, and I'm going to read them out and just give a very short commentary on each thread, but they're mostly self-explanatory. They kind of stand by themselves, and I won't say too much, just a little bit at the end of each one. Dear Mr. and Mrs. America, the Majestic12 was a secret group of 12 individuals created by the United States government that would operate outside of law, oversight, and governance because of a discovery that took place in the desert in Roswell, New Mexico. Join us. Pretext/history. Prior to the creation of MJ12, or Magic Eyes Only, classification compartmentalized deemed need to know wasn't allowed prior to 1947's National Security Act. The founding members were key players in events that led up to Roswell. There was a setup. In Operation Paperclip, we acquired through means necessary at the time to bring over 1,800 plus Nazi scientists, scholars, and officers. We smuggled them into the country and gave them new identities in very deeply compartmentalized, unacknowledged by you, top secret special access programs. We learned from the 1,800 plus Nazis that Germany had engineered flying saucer prototypes at the guidance of a god in the flesh and blood doing the bidding of this extraterrestrial. Hitler was working with this being, as we later came to find out. Hitler was merely a disposable pawn. Now, understand that in Stargate SG-1, the Goa'uld are a parasitical reptilian race of aliens that take a host in order to cheat death, and boom, we will cross-reference this in a moment. We are not saying that Hitler was a Goa'uld. The Goa'uld are fictional characters that portrayed a very real truth in the universe. Hitler aside, the leading Nazis we smuggled into the country weren't going to give up their deepest military secrets to their former enemy. We are still their enemy. So instead, we were instructed on how to build a device capable of downing the navigational systems on board. Their orders, directly as assets of the US military, demanded that they take valuable action towards acquiring a German flying bell. Instead, what happened that glorious night was not what we could have ever believed. The truth will haunt you. We are about to explain. The craft that crash-landed wasn't just a spaceship not from this Earth, but that the occupants inside had many striking similarities to our own Homo sapien or humanoid design. We had similar DNA, yet their bodies were genetically engineered to perform very complex missions. Not only did they have a different configuration of organs throughout their humanoid doll bodies, but they possessed organs unlike anything on planet Earth. They were from out there. This gave the United States government the opportunity to use the threat that Hitler was in league with a god who claimed to be an ET, but that we, the Americans, had struck gold because we know that God does not present himself before you. The misunderstanding of that term, your immortal, spiritual, biological entity, Isby, is your soul, is, and your body, be. You are an Isby. All life in the universe are Isbys. We are all the same. We are all one. We are connected together through our pineal gland. Our consciousness comes from God, or all, or Isby. We, Americans, by definition of our national identity from the founding fathers, was that we knew God was all and that freedom to practice faith towards God was permitted in any form. This posed an interesting, complex web of information. Originally, our government fought the traffickers and the drug running and the child kidnappings. Now, that's all it does, not protect. This group of parasitical bloodline families were worshipping an ancient Babylonian god Isbi of child sacrifice, Moloch. We knew from prior intelligence that those who started the IRS and Federal Reserves were directly involved in ritualistic child sacrifice, including drinking the blood of a child. We shall use a pop culture reference here. It's appropriate. Research Moloch. In Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, Bane said, "It's a terrible crime to slay a unicorn. Drinking the blood of a unicorn will keep you alive, even if you are an inch from death, but at a terrible cost. You've slain something so pure, you will have half a life. A cursed life." CC Rowling. "But who can choose such a life?" asked Harry. "Can you think of no one?" Bane replied. "A unicorn is a mythical creature of pure beauty and spirit. A baby is that. A creature of pure beauty and spirit. A baby is a unicorn. Isbis come in many shapes, sizes, forms, colors, abilities, etc. Literally whatever you could think of exists in the universe. This knowledge came to us after hundreds of hours logged with telepathic human representatives communicating with Eben 1 and Eben 2. We learned that the entity controlling Hitler was acting and behaving in extremely evil behavior. This was apparent, however. We can look back at Stargate SG-1 and compare the Ori to the tactics to brainwash their followers despite being lied to. The progress made in the years leading to a trade essentially resulted in us faking Hitler's death. Majestic loved movies. Are you enjoying the show? In exchange that he stopped working with the E.T. Isbi that was pure evil. Well, let us reiterate, rinse and repeat. The Cabal is currently being led by another Committee I of E.T. Isbis, connected to ongoings within the unacknowledged space program that the Americans took over when Germany fell. That's why Operation Paperclip happened. However, the past 30 years, we have witnessed a massive subversion of power from the American people in the name of national security. Now connect that to CIA programs operating within the United States through social engineered programs like school shootings and terror attacks. This group of individuals is the enemy of the Majestic 12, and for the first time in decades, we have finally elected a commander-in-chief who can drain the swamp and open the stars to the world. See, you've known the truth all along. The truth is hiding in plain sight, structured around propaganda and social engineering. Roswell opened a massive can of worms that was directly under the control of the Majestic 12. We operated above top secret. Anything went, you name it. Unspeakable. Evil. Why? Learn to archive offline. Who are the Cylons? Get over the divide and conquer of every major franchise out there and just look at raw data. Think mirror. Hollywood glimpsed into reality of what space is. It's what you make it to be. Your will. Unlimited possibilities exist, and you need only choose a path. We know fundamentally that the highest level of consciousness is light. Photons. Everywhere. Literally everywhere. The Majestic 12 loved movies. We had to, at all costs necessary, ultimately caving to the committee or an SG-1 reference, the trust, ensure that the fact we had A. Make first contact with alien life, B. Learned the universe is full of life, was kept from originally the Chi-Coms and USSR, but ultimately from the American people. For this misdeed, we are sincerely sorry to have let you down in such a way. Understanding full disclosure requires you to understand what full is. What can be disclosed? We learned how to do it, and a group has been using those weapons against you. The Space Force is 100% necessary in order for us to ensure that no other E.T. Isbi, more evolved humanoids than yourself, and sometime looking human humanoids, are violating massive human rights abuses. The purpose of life is to love and be loved, nothing else. Despite the bad that this group was involved in, and the military's justification for the trafficking of children they steal from the American people every day, 800,000 plus per year, the military believed through fault of their own that they were wrong, allowing Moloch-like E.T. Isbis to violate our law because they have some fancy space weapons can be quite a daunting task to undertake. After all, we are talking about transforming our society in the next 10 years into a space culture with spaceports to Andromeda and America first. Yes, horrible things have happened. Can we change it? We can only change the future. We can go back in time and undo what we did, but the resulting world would have been conquered immediately had the secret got out too early. And this is one of the best Majestic 12 long threads, and probably the first notable one that they did in their whole account. And I'm not sure if I read the whole thing. out before my channel, but basically it's talking about the formation of Majestic 12. And when that happened, these two entities, Eben 1 and 2, those were the Zeta Reticulan beings who survived the crash that they interviewed telepathically. They got information from them, and they talk about opening a massive can of worms with the technology that came from Roswell and the discovery of alien life, how they had to cover that up from, as they say here, China and the USSR, but also from the American people since that time, 1947, was when the crash happened. So for over 70 years, they've been covering this up. And they mention how Hollywood has been a mirror for this disclosure about these secrets, and especially Stargate SG-1. See the Gold, this short summary. The Gold are a race of sentient parasitic beings that take over hosts. Several species can serve as hosts, including humans and Unas. They originated on the planet designated P3X888. They are also extremely egomaniacal due to their genetic memory and adverse mental effects of the sarcophagus technology. And the Lori are fictional characters in the science fiction television series Stargate SG-1. They are a group of ascended beings who use their advanced technology and knowledge of the universe to attempt to trick non-ascended humans into worshipping them as gods. Now, this is such a good thread, and discussing the history of the secret space program and how it, was a continuation of what the Germans were doing in World War II, and it even goes back to World War I probably, and how Hitler was working with an extraterrestrial being in secret, and apparently the US military or government cut a deal with him to stop working with that being so that, he could survive, and apparently he went to Argentina where he just lived out the rest of his life, and talking about how US military intelligence was aware of this worship of Moloch. And, when they say here, the Federal Reserves, it's 1913, this is a long time ago, and they knew about it. And wow, just an amazing story. I won't say too much because there's other threads that go more into this, and we'll talk about more later, like this one here, which was actually before this first thread, but I put it second. You'll see why. We did not understand them at first. Now that's talking about the two Zeta Reticulans, Eben 1 and Eben 2, that crashed at Roswell. We perceived their superiority as a threat and acted accordingly. When we learned who and what they were, and how they were us from the future, we learned who we were. When we did, many groups rose to power within the shadow government, aka MJ12. Each member with their own agenda it became. Serious internal struggles within, some siding with a more advanced culture and society versus defending what it means to be human and what that definition is. Many played God, many mistakes made. They have their own path that is different from ours, but they are like brethren when it comes to life in the galaxy. We are of the same class structure of DNA that define what a humanoid is, and therefore acknowledging their significance was monumental. In every way intentional did we create the science fiction phenomenon of your time in order to divide and conquer you with the truth. It's been out in plain sight for decades. Are you enjoying the movie? Each franchise was in a way an experiment to see how society would react to multiple types of safe disclosure scenarios that would guarantee Earth's survival in the event of a galactic war with our largest enemy currently unprosecuted. We controlled the money, we controlled the weapons, we controlled the politicians through pedophilia blackmail, we controlled the Federal Reserve, we controlled everything. We are the Majestic 12, a group created by criminals who did the right thing for the wrong reasons. Disclosure is a human right. Full disclosure to those who are willing. We are at a critical time right now. Good versus evil. The Majestic 12 are at the pleasure to the POTUS because he is the enemy of C-322, Cabal, Skull and Bones. We only disclose what is already common knowledge among thy consciousness. The path to true enlightenment is not with a flashlight. A tool cannot bring you enlightenment, and disclosure is only necessary where voids in logic exist. Where reason and evidence compels you to consider the cost of seeking evidence of your disclosure, do you then seek the light? Therefore, providing information that is not currently known to your collective state of consciousness would be dangerous to the stability of successfully executing the plan. The truth is here for those who seek it. Here is where you are, where the truth is. It doesn't matter where. When we drop information, we expect it to be common knowledge. Seek the truth further. The questions will help guide you to the next density. What do you want to know about full disclosure, and how can you learn how to use your new abilities of remote viewing to learn everything? But why does seeking the truth really require so much? Perhaps failed social engineering experiments performed by this criminal system of justice. Pay attention to when POTUS mentioned, quote, justice. Why the quote about justice? Are our laws illegal? Up is down, left is right. But wait, what are we suggesting? Suggesting that the POTUS take action to his pleasure and then take the security clearances from these individuals. 45 versus 45K, he can do it, but every move he makes is calculated. Currently, Mockingbird Media has, through verifiable military intelligence understandings, a strong hold on the current brand of reality, and we are dropping major disclosure bombs all over the place. This is about evolving to a race capable of interstellar space travel, knowing some of the dangers associated with it, but how, having a strong military, can you have safety to all the people under those domains? In an oversight classification system of all compartmented areas, can we ensure that no horrid crimes against humanity, like raping, torturing, and eating dead babies, was taking place, and therefore ensure that all resources being collected were going to the betterment of the people by hiring classified government agents on board to spread tons of disinformation? Again, so they expand on the Zetas that crashed at Roswell, that they interacted with them, what they found out about, their own nature, human beings, and how these extraterrestrials were similar to them, even though physically they looked different. They were still humanoid. And then it goes into how Majestic 12 got entangled in criminal activity due to decisions that were made by people lower down in the hierarchy that interpreted being above national security laws that they could commit any kinds of crime without any reproach, right? And that's kind of like how the beginning of this whole child trafficking thing just got out of control. It's because Majestic 12 weren't in a position to stop it at that time. They had to use it as a veil to protect their own secrecy of the secret space program. And they mention how people are brainwashed by the fake news, many of them at least. And just to recap on the end of that last thread, they talk about how the decisions that they made with how MJ12 proceeded since their formation were based on this paradox of trying to develop this technology in time secretly before that secret got out to the rest of the world, or that technology escaped and caused a nuclear war and destroyed the world. That if they didn't do that, namely if they didn't cover this up, then the technology could have destroyed the world, because even now the Cabal hasn't been prosecuted. That needs to happen before this technology reaches the public, and they definitely don't want it to get into their enemies' hands, their rival countries, that is, like China, for example. That's why the Space Force is important, and they talk about this movie. 007 Spectre was a disclosure of the risk with creating mass surveillance, technology falling into the wrong hands, and what it would look like. Let's begin. Spectre the octopus is the symbol on their rings, displayed in public for all to see. Cabal the owl is their symbol for their rings, displayed in public for all to see. Spectre introduced an international cabal of many powerful people who you've been taught to love and trust, that they were really just hell-bent on world domination at all costs, no matter what they did in private. The Clinton Foundation is that kind of cabal, like seen in Spectre, but think mirror. You see a reality inside Spectre that does not exist. The basic fabric of the structure differs in that the Clinton Foundation cabal trafficking children to international pedophile rings. In Spectre, they aren't trafficking kids, so the emotional social engineering used taught us that James Bond was going to save the day. This taught society that just rely on a fictional character who can save the day that doesn't exist in reality, because who says? Evidence is now in the public domain that validate all speculation into the evidence collected under the circumstances. It is, without a doubt, a Spectre kind of an organization. But the difference between fiction and real life, something extremely majestic, is that fiction is always one person who saves many, whereas reality is many people save many lives. The logical flip was a social engineering tactic used to brainwash billions. This was MK Ultra. The mind control techniques of ad tech / social media media/mainstream media is unprecedented. It takes many people working together, united by love, helping to save many people from horrific crimes disclosed in Spectre, let alone that in reality it was always Moloch and not Octopus who was real. The recent Octopus references are connected with the recent dumb drops. Remember, the Pentagon via MJ12 have a working relationship with Hollywood for this very reason. It is Majestic 12's responsibility to ensure that all propaganda being developed was going to follow our narrative. As it turns out, part of our disclosure process was using symbology connected with the octopus to enlighten others to the possibility that intelligent octopus had spaceships and other crazy time travel abilities, rewriting the laws of physics. How? How does an octopus evolve to the point to travel in space via spaceship and time travel in addition? Why isn't a monkey that capable in the universe? How would they look? Another disclosure was in Arrival, where the compromising components of the United States government to China can be peacefully resolved with disclosure. However, China wants control over the planet, not just their country. They are positioning themselves to be a global superpower. If we allow disclosure to go through the horrific abuses of China, such as human trafficking, child sex slaves, baby harvesting operations, child sacrifice rituals, slave trade, slave work conditions, massive income and wealth inequality, instead we, Majestic 12, always had the upper hand in the creation of this modern-day society that is alien to anyone from when the Majestic 12 were created, despite the civilian branches of the government, to get flooded with these criminals who we knew but had our hands tied so that the transnational, interplanetary, interdimensional worship of Moloch began. It's been in power for thousands of years. This group's bloodline can be traced back to the Bible. They are the same as bees who are traveling through space and time to control those. But as an Anon on YouTube stated in Q's Plan to Save the World video stated, remember how important bloodline families are in Moloch versus Octopus, and now let us explain time travel. If you want to go back in your own time and change the many protecting many fact to one protecting many, you are left with the change of details when facts change. Trafficking kids is a lot more of a complex business than you think. These people are obsessed with sacrificing children. Disclosure happened years ago. Wake up. And so that was the end of the thread. And so it was mainly about mass surveillance, and they call that a majestic technology that can be used for either good or evil. We will come to that more shortly. But yeah, they say they knew about the cabal, but they had their hands tied because of Roswell, and they were trying to deal with that. Therefore, they couldn't take on the cabal at that time because they were concerned with developing the secret space program as their highest priority and keeping that secret, and seeding their majestic surveillance technology so that the cabal would incriminate themselves with it, like, you know, the blackmail videos. And so that's why it's the Q team's job to prosecute the cabal next, and does mention how bad the crimes against children going on in the world are, such as in China, where it's basically illegal. They take away people's kids, you have too many, and it's just really bad. But then those are their laws, so it's sick. And again, repeating how people are brainwashed by the mainstream media, also heavily influenced by social media and ad tech. That was proceeding from MKUltra. It's not the actual MKUltra program itself. Continuation of that later on, different programs. MKUltra was like one of the beginnings. Yeah, and then they mentioned how different the world is today to when the Majestic 12 was formed, because, you know, at that time there was less technology around, and the cabal wasn't as influential as well. And basically we're living this matrix that was created by MJ12 to keep the planet under control, and the cabal used that same matrix to exploit everyone to their advantage. But if you look at Majestic 12 as kind of like the intelligence agency behind, you know, how the US government's been run, that's kind of what they are. That makes sense, like above the government, but they're the ones, you know, behind the scenes running the government itself. Ranking franchises with respect to their disclosure efforts: 1. Stargate SG-1, 2. Star Trek, 3. Star Wars. Other disclosure programs were embedded after the fact and not intended to be used for secret space program disclosure. 1. Stargate SG-1 disclosed the following: DUMS, real purpose. ET Life is in regular contact with US military. The Trust are the Cabal, minus the Vatican angle. US military has several space vessels, exotic space weapons, medical technology unavailable to public, plus more. 2. Star Trek disclosed the following. Nobody gets paid in the secret space program for their secret space program work. Cabal engineering, food replication technology, hyperdimensional travel, warp speed, how socialism is supposed to be implemented. Cabal engineering, galaxy has a few rival races. 3. Star Wars disclosed the following. Glorify jihad against governments. Cabal engineering, worship of pure evil. Cabal engineering, galaxies filled with rivaling races. Cabal engineering, barter is a universal form of currency. Cabal engineering. All three of these franchises were necessary to a certain extent during the purposes of controlled disclosure of the secret space program. Majestic 12 used the Cabal to do most of the heavy lifting with respect to disclosing most of the secret space program. We knew they were worshipping Moloch and still did it. It was necessary for this information to get out, and those three major franchises were just a handful of major disclosure projects that the Majestic 12 worked on. Cabal engineered disclosure embeds much propaganda, social engineering, and divide and conquer techniques all throughout the programming. We call that programming for a reason. Star Wars attracted the youth of many and was therefore heavily exploited by the Cabal. Star Trek attracted the young adults of the world and was therefore partially exploited, mostly for communist purposes. Stargate SG-1, on the other hand, was targeted towards adults and has the least amount of Cabal engineering. Yep, so that's emphasizing how Majestic 12 made disclosure through Hollywood, and in this case these series and movies, that it's like I guess an unofficial form of disclosure, so it's important to kind of recognize it as that. I think some people were aware about how Stargate SG-1 was a form of disclosure that the US military was doing, and like the hardcore fans knew about it. So it's not like disclosure's never taken place. It's been done a lot through movies, and Majestic 12 say that they know that, you know, Hollywood is controlled by the Cabal, but they still did it anyway, even though they knew that it didn't matter. And on to the next thread. Limited character space. Dense message. Roswell beings educated military intelligence about consciousness and how it can be manipulated and exploited with substances. Alcohol is pushed because it calcifies your pineal gland. Marijuana is prohibited because Roswell Zeta Reticulans explained its value. Alcohol is engineered to make sheep vulnerable. It is for that reason why it is intensely pushed by the Cabal, or Deep State, or Majestic Cabal, or the Majestic 12. Roswell discoveries instructed through cause and effect predictions with the Stargate to exploit alcohol. Marijuana legalization will come with disclosure because they are intimately connected to understanding the biological connection our consciousness has with other plants and species, and what information those life forms are attempting to communicate and how. What is alien? Alcohol instead impairs that mind-body-plant consciousness connection and interacts with you with a mark of the beast. Alcohol brings out the worst in humanity. This is why it's pushed. Who worships the devil? The Vatican does. Belief in God is not required for belief in the devil. The Majestic 12, in its earliest formations, served the Vatican exclusively on all matters relating to God. The presence of beings were withheld from the Vatican by military intelligence. However, the Vatican was already in open dialogue with Zeta Reticulans prior. As far as we were concerned, as long as the Vatican wasn't against us, we could do pretty much anything, so we did. The Vatican wanted disclosure kept from the public because they worship the devil and feed on children. Those networks were used for exploiting and collecting blackmail on politicians by creating classified sources and methods by individuals who have legally not committed a crime be responsible for finding volunteers who will act on their own accord in classified settings. Typically, this meant preventing the left hand from knowing what the right hand is doing. Those who were moving the children were taught never to ask questions or you risk the chance of being killed next. Reasons of national security were the threat of ETs in space, and the power-hungry Vatican essentially forced the hand of the United States through people's faith in false and dogmatic religions. So while we kept those programs alive, we introduced severe crime bills designed to kill two birds with one stone. Many people in government are very racist people who feed on the black community's ignorance to their crimes. It's disgraceful. Alcohol drinking was adjusted because the exclusivity and illegality get easy accessibility and constant advertisements enabled people to be sneaky to get it, which allowed blackmail/evil energy to essentially be collected on consumers of alcohol. At the same time, we intensified the growing process and manufacturing process of marijuana with a high level of intelligence thanks to Mang-ET contracts that happen naturally to those who have compatible vibrational states of consciousness. This was used for two purposes. We wanted to naturally allow culture to explore refining marijuana. However, since we were essentially working for the devil/Vatican, we instead withheld vital knowledge about marijuana's co-creative consciousness, impact it has on the mind-body link. In Operation Stargate, MJ12 used remote viewing to explore cause and effect changes in environments while under the influence of marijuana and alcohol. We learned that alcohol inhibits the consciousness from controlling the beast. Marijuana was the opposite. The beast cowers to marijuana. Using the Stargate device, we were able to peer into reality of our matrix of consciousness, and not inward projection that makes remote viewing inaccurate compared to a Stargate. We knew that alcohol, mass incarceration of blacks, make marijuana illegal, but fund the drug cartels as informants, trafficking, everything for sources and methods to collect intelligence, all to keep Roswell secret. The Vatican had a lot more control over the world back in 1947 than it does today. We may witness in our lifetime the destruction of the Vatican for the first time in over 89 years. The institution is corrupt, and the definition of evil/the devil. We did both good and evil. We played the role of gods and created the matrix of the mind many people are stuck in. We are here to break from that system, accept disclosure, and bring dark to light. We weren't ready then. We are now. Our future is amazing. We have spent decades prepping you for it so we can make a 10,000-year leap in civilization development in under a decade. Innovation floodgates have been busted wide open. A flood approaches. That's a very powerful conclusion that they made there. Now, if you think of the Majestic 12, as they say here, as the ones responsible for making this matrix that people are brainwashed in, now that the world's ready for disclosure and first contact, or almost ready, this is the same group who did this for so many years behind the scenes. We didn't really know their fingerprints, that it was actually the Majestic 12, and we've had them on Twitter for 3 years before they got suspended, saying what's going to happen and how, they were the puppet masters, the real puppet masters. And this thread was about the difference between alcohol and marijuana. So how alcohol kind of numbs you, puts you to sleep, and marijuana awakens your consciousness. And obviously there's two different strains, completely different strains, indica and sativa, that are almost like different drugs. And when they mention here about how it's going to become legalized, a lot of states in America, or some at least, it has become legal, and not countrywide yet, but if that matters to you, you could live in a state where it's legal. And I think they reference how alcohol was prohibited in America, like in the early 20th century, and how they were sort of behind all of this criminal activity essentially for the purposes of keeping Roswell secret. Like, that was their intention. It wasn't to actually do evil. It was just to cover up the secret space program. So it's a real paradox. It's important to understand, and how they were in contact with the Vatican, and where they played along with them for a while. And later on, they do say that they will destroy the Vatican. So that'll be interesting to watch when it happens. The preparations and groundwork laid out by past administrations and members within the cabal, some former MJ12 members, for a false flag alien invasion as a means to justify global governance, will commence as planned. The enemy is not made up, as the conspiracy theory Project Bluebeam suggests. The enemy is very real. However, the enemy was the entity that set up Project Bluebeam in the first place. We are going to use their weapon against them for their crimes against humanity, for God and country. Disclosure will take place, and it will be the catalyst to ending the cabal, establishing the Space Force, and declaring a planet-wide independence from the Draco, who have long controlled Earth. With great power comes great responsibility. They never thought she would lose. The first race to be disclosed will most likely be a hostile enemy of Earth. However, part of keeping the public calm during this period will be, as POTUS says, acknowledging that Americans are actually very intelligent and aware of what's really going on. Once the Draco are confronted, at least one of the race is planning on coming forward for public first contact with POTUS to form an alliance that will require a global governance, but one that respects sovereignty of tribal states to stop all nuclear proliferation. Martial law will be required during this period of time. So I'm not sure what people's public perception about extraterrestrials are, like whether they think they're evil and hostile or neutral. That's kind of my impression. I think most of them are really good or neutral. There's some negative ones that will have to be disclosed here, and then we know that Sandy the ET, the good Zeta Reticulans, the same as the ones that crashed in Roswell, they are already on Earth. They've been here for a while, and apparently they're going to be part of the first contact. You know, they said there's like 30-something races, I think, that are going to be ready for first contact. And talking about martial law, how that will happen during first contact, which I probably would expect, but we don't actually know. I mean, they're not going to reveal their plans. Mostly this thread was talking about how there was this plan for a fake alien invasion by the Cabal, and they were going to use that to control the planet and control the Earth. So far, according to what's happened, it seemed like the virus was the means to do that. So I don't even know if that's going to happen, like the fake alien invasion, because the virus is already like taking control of most developed countries, if you know what I'm saying. So it's like almost as if they were referring to the virus. And yeah, Project Bluebeam is the same thing as this fake alien invasion. And when they say use the weapons against them, we'll have to see what happens in that regard. I'm not sure what they're referring to there. I think it meant that they were going to do actual first contact, so the Cabal was setting up for the fake first contact, and then, you know, Majestic 12 Q team are going to pull the rug out of the Cabal at the last moment, you know, prosecute them in military tribunals, and then they'll do the real first contact. I think that's kind of what it means, but I'm not 100% sure. A Majestic message of disclosure. Florida's Broward County and Palm Beach County play a critical role in one of the CIA's Majestic operations that included the following aspects, all intermingled into one operation to maintain secrecy. Mind control experiments were heavily funded at the federal level in Florida that resulted in many sleeper cell agents to be activated at specific events. Organized child procurement operations embedded deep within very large media corporations to provide supply to transnational CIA child trafficking trade. Public spaceport of entry means federal funding is laundered through Florida, essentially funding all of these operations. Victims in the state of Florida include citizens on rare occasions. Non-citizens are essential to this organization. They believe the non-citizen is consumable and disposable because they are not protected under our laws. The Floridian incumbent senator is a dirty politician with skeletons deep inside his closet, including providing protection to Broward County election corruption because of the implications actions would have on these unacknowledged CIA/Majestic operations. The Floridian defeated politician is deeply involved in these unacknowledged programs, which include a perverted affinity towards young children, including pedophilia and sodomy, as well as snuff murder. The Majestic operations running domestically in Florida were being run to supply money, children, slaves, and political power to several DUMs strategically placed within Broward County and Palm Beach County. The old guard is being systematically dismantled by the super elite Defense Intelligence Agency. A new future awaits America, and it is one that includes disclosing extraterrestrial life not only here on Earth, but also on the Moon, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, and many more. A Stargate exists in Florida that transports hundreds of assets between off-world bases. Many who are transferred are children being funneled through some of the major entertainment corporations of Florida, who are Majestic appointees of the past. Florida is not an anomaly. You can dig deep in every state in the Union. However, Florida is certainly a hub of sorts. You are witnessing the systematic destruction of the old guard. You are watching the true identity of the deep state/Democratic Party, not Democrats, the party corporation itself. This body is vastly responsible for the manufacturing of mainstream propaganda, entertainment of all types, from children's stories to porn with children themes, to TV shows that are absolutely worthless to a militarized presence in space filled with hostile aliens. No peace. This body is also vastly responsible for the manufacturing of compliant subordinates that is okay with their own children being abducted for these secret programs. Some of them are actually complicit. They know what happens and understand that they are porn and not personal. This body is also vastly responsible for news and political media coverage in the United States. For decades, Their strictly controlled pundits regularly visited Majestic operations in Florida, which included blackmail collection using children. It wasn't until the good side of the military took control over Majestic 12 in a capacity capable of dismantling it did we start to see top US intel officials become full-time anchors for the largest news and political media corporations. The ship is sinking. They know it. Florida is a major state to understand when it comes to the deep state, the Bush cartel, the Saudis, and interplanetary child slave trading for religious consumption to continuously feed the occult magic connected to adrenochrome, which is this here, chemical extracted from the pineal gland. Adrenochrome is traded intergalactically among many power-hungry races. These other races trade knowledge and access to extreme power for long periods of time in exchange for constant feedings. Many rituals that occur, the cult members witness the demon, aka the extraterrestrial alien, consume the sacrifice, and the members who join the cabal must participate in order to prove their allegiance to this higher form of intelligence from their own. When time and space are an illusion to you, and you have a ship capable of interplanetary travel, trading a few favors for convenient events in exchange for the sacrifices, these entities exist solely for this purpose, and they too have very advanced technology. A lot of that technology has come out of Florida, and this systematic attack on youth and our children came out of both Florida and Hollywood, but probably more consequently, Florida. The programs operated out of Florida by the old guard were horrific crimes against humanity, and admission into the Galactic Federation requires all world leaders to unite behind eradicating these enemies. Another alien hotbed in pedophilia rampant culture, France, just had an assassination attempt on 45. The destruction of the old guard is larger than just the United States. This requires a global great awakening. We honor and respect the service and dedication to our country that all veterans of America have put forth. Freedom isn't free, and some make the ultimate sacrifice. Many were betrayed, and for that, we are committed to unifying the country once again through truth and disclosure. Finally, remember billionaire pedophile Jeff Epstein, who ran the Lolita Express where Bill Clinton regularly frequented, was actually just an FBI operation being run under Comey. Those who know cannot sleep. Panic in D.C. Trust the plan. Every major legal authority in Florida was corrupted by Operation Majestic Childhood. Jeffrey Epstein's case proved it. When he got off on real charges, the cabal believed it got measurably stronger and more confident. More mistakes. The Majestic 12 on paper is not involved in any of this activity. However, outside of insecure paper, ulterior motives corrupted early members of Majestic 12, where their actions alone were majestic that make it very difficult to combat in the dark. Now, talking about Florida and the CIA operations that go there, especially relating to children and other criminal acts there, and they mentioned the DIA. They're systematically dismantling the cabal. They have the technology, so they know everything about that well from surveillance of them for decades. Therefore, they know how to take them apart. You referred to it as knowing which wires to cut, so they're dismantling the bomb, stopping from going off, just like they averted nuclear war several years ago, apparently. And what else have we got here? They're talking about the preparations that need to be made worldwide before a first contact takes place. Who created the original couple? Does this fundamental question invalidate the claims being made here? Are deductions and guesses science? Hashtag the more you know. It's linking to an article. All humans may be descended from just two people, study finds. The fundamental and most majestic question of all is, where did humans come from? The Majestic 12 kept ET disclosure secret because the Vatican demanded it. When the Vatican's tentacles took control over Majestic 12 through 322/Cabal, original MJ12 members revolted and fought. The original story of creation, as told by all major religions, is a lie. Humans were genetically engineered by the domain to be vessels capable of experiencing many facets of the lower dimensions in order to develop and grow the spirit. The young don't always do as they're told. The story of creation has been deliberately withheld from humanity for thousands of years. Conception is a complex set of instructions the domain created to allow light beings to enter into the lower dimensions. When you die, if you walk into the light, the moment of contact you make with the light is the moment of conception where sperm meets egg. This was not easy to create. It took millions of years of development to get right. It's still being tweaked as we speak by ET races. When you die, if you walk into the void, you are essentially admitted into the higher densities. However, if you are not spiritually developed enough, higher density beings will send you back to the prison planet of Earth to further develop. This, of course, is for Earth beings. Now, talking about how the story of creation is told by religions is a lie, and we're really descended from extraterrestrials, and they, tweak our DNA and kind of monitor us, which is, that's what the Majestic 12 found out. And it's an important question, like what is the origin of human beings? But when first contact takes place, we'll find out that there's many other humanoid races that look, they have arms and legs and a head like we do, but they look different. Some of them very different. Actually, some of them look very similar as well. That will be very interesting to cover when it happens. On to another thread. Majestic 12 was very evil a short period ago. Months prior to Q being released to the public, 45 signed legislation that took control over MJ12. Since then, we have flipped the table and are now using their weapons on them to clean house of this group of sick people. Someone asks, have you heard about this alleged decades-long Operation Majestic Childhood? To which they replied, as stated in previous posts, that name is a generalized majestic name for a series of lower, compartmentalized programs designed to prevent the left hand from knowing what the right hand was doing. MJ12 was never the masterminds of the child trafficking rings. Our mandate was simple: protect the secret at all costs. Subordinate agencies used this mandate as an excuse to being operating those trafficking programs. Once that was done, Majestic 12 had to reconcile and continue to maintain secrecy, so we intertwined them. As our internal development improved and the spacecraft reverse engineering operations started yielding results, major changes took place around JFK in the Majestic 12 that resulted in it aligning itself with the NWO of Bush 41 and his cult, Skull and Bones, who was actually just working for ETs. When 41 became an MJ12 member, and then later in his career the head of MJ12, we were realigned to officially merge the trafficking programs with the sacrifice programs associated with 322 and other cult groups. Once MJ12 started interacting with the being who was consuming the sacrifices, we learned they had operations all over the planet, and they weren't alone. At the direction of 41, when he joined MJ12 in the 60s, instead of resisting the demands of these beings, he aligned MJ12 to enable these beings, and in return, the US military would get technology. A lot of the technology collected after this point was, and still is, harmful for humans to consume. Technology that was helpful to humans was restricted, prohibited, and harsh laws were introduced to curb any attempts at sabotage. We were 20 steps ahead of everybody else. This technology included cloning, genetic manipulation, more on this in a second, vaccines, superviruses, and transhumanism. Genetic manipulation technology was seeded into American corporations. They are currently being sued over causing cancer. This was known in the 60s. In fact, when 41 took over MJ12, MJ12 essentially became a rouge operation and the deep state itself. However, the entity itself today is much larger than just 12 individuals at the highest ranks in government. The Majestic 12 was the 12-headed dragon at the end of your quest that you had to defeat. Nobody without the correct combination of consciousness could defeat what we had built. There was only one problem with 41's plan. The Constitution made MJ12 technically illegal, and for that reason, it was protected as national security. Because of the original chartered mandate, it never changed, even though MJ12's programs changed in the 1960s after JFK. However, what happens when the good forces in the military take control over MJ12, cease to operate the sacrifice programs, and essentially give a big middle finger to the aliens demanding the children? You're faced with the storm we see today. Many celebrities, politicians, government employees, civilians, etc., who were involved in these programs were all working for these ETs, even if they had no clue. It was designed this way. When the feed was cut off, the revenge started showing itself through linked consciousness. The people who were under the spell, so to speak, of these ETs, from their sacrifices and commitments to Satan/Lucifer himself, not really himself, just claimed to be, would receive constant conscious communication with the ISBs the US military was actively fighting. Some of this crosses red line territory, so we won't be expanding any further quite yet. However, the purpose of the Space Force creation was to force all of the secret technology out of the shadows and into the Commander-in-Chief's desk. The law requires them to comply. Additionally, dedicated patriots in the military who were just as upset about 9/11, and most civilians, were decided that enough was enough. MJ12 was commandeered a month after 9/11, and the Space Preservation Act was enabled to block future Rouge Majestic 12 operations. The military audit currently ongoing is turning up technology that is out of this world, and in science fiction, you've heard both the president and vice president refer to this new technology as such. Hollywood knew the secret and they hid it in plain sight. Since the Space Preservation Act was designed to stop MJ12, which had had relatively little success until Hillary Rodham Clinton was removed from office, who was also an MJ12 member until recently. Once MJ12 got into the hands of the good side of the DIA, and later to 45, those weapons can now be used against them. 45 has constantly said, "I am rebuilding our military, and I will never forgive Obama for what he did to our military. Not anymore." The audit is turning up technology the likes of which the world has never seen before, and the only solution to ensure we survive is to unite as a planet and realize we are all humans, and our problems at home won't seem so big if we faced an alien threat. Many people here like to tell us, the Majestic 12, that there are no such thing as bad aliens. They are good-willed, but severely ignorant. The alien false flag invasion was supposed to be just that, an invasion, but planned by the winning side before it happened. Americans were to be the losers of that battle, but regardless of how power has shifted, it still requires us to deal with the fact that 322 is powerful. For this, we need a space force, and to bring out a lot of that technology hidden in the compartmentalized programs through the nation's top defense contractors. You'd be surprised how many people actually want to see this happen. Yeah, so in that thread, they talk about how Majestic 12 was originally 12 members, 12 people who operated at the highest ranks in government, and then they mentioned how they weren't the ones doing the actual trafficking themselves. They weren't responsible for it. It was just 12 people. But subordinate agencies use this mandate as an excuse to being operating those trafficking programs. Once that was done, Majestic 12 had to reconcile and continue to maintain secrecy, so we intertwined them. And then further on they go as far as to say that, Majestic 12 got taken over by the cabal. Bush 41 became the head of MJ12, and they were working with the hostile negative extraterrestrials. And, around the time of 9/11, which was a disaster, then patriots in the military took back control of Majestic 12 to stop that happening or anything worse happening. And they say they're using the cabal's weapons against them now to clean up ship. So Majestic 12 became so powerful, but control was lost over the organization and had to be gained back decades later, which is where we are today. A majestic message of disclosure. Go back to July 4th, 2001. Turn your TV on. 9/11 coming to a theater near you. Future proves past. When JFK was assassinated, MJ12 moved into the open within government, essentially pressing start to begin creating the NWO as the Zetas told us about. We were the deep state. We propagandized Hollywood. We developed advanced alien technology in secret. We ran all crime. When 9/11 came to a theater near you, Majestic 12 moved into the open. Stargate SG-1 was part of the equation. Congressional disclosure hearings warranted a proper naval, intelligence, civilian approach to ET disclosure. MJ12 opposed this at all costs. Pentagon tried to fight. Next day, 9/11. Majestic 12 moved into the open. We revealed the classified dumb's true identity to the world, and nobody blinks twice. Quite expected, actually. The Matrix is real. We operated in the dark for a long period of time. Canada actually helped the United States out with disclosure of SG-1 because Paul Hellyer was so poorly treated by Congress when we stopped the congressional hearings. His testimony was true, every word of it. It was war inside the Pentagon when these hearings were happening. Majestic 12 was originally the body pushing for the disclosure of ET life to the public in a controlled manner to ensure proper government restructuring. However, when 9/11 was orchestrated by several MJ12 members as a way to throw the scent off the trail and go over here, this derailed decades of planning and flung the United States into a suicide nosedive where 2017 is going to be the year of a nuclear holocaust. During this nosedive period, the Majestic 12 worked tirelessly against the interests of the people without risking compromising the operation that had to be carefully planned out and executed. When HRC was neutralized by the Pentagon, MJ12 changed hands to the DIA under new leadership, essentially returning MJ12 home. Panic in DC, pain coming soon to a theater near you. hashtag Majestic. Yeah, repeating how MJ12 basically became the cabal, or joined to the cabal, and at 9/11, some disclosures started happening. Stargate SG-1, and that's 20 years ago now, but now we might see the real events happening, like disclosure and then first contact. Talking about how Q Team stopped Hillary from getting elected there. Part of the strategy to Pizzagate was we needed a key to unlock the NSA. Pizzagate was the key. When Pizzagate broke, new voices joined the movement and were motivated by Seth Rich's murder. Once the cat was out of the bag, the cabal deployed every asset against the efforts of Q/MJ12/45 to delegitimize and defraud the American electorate, as Clinton did, according to DNC lawyer testimony, essentially rigged the election against Sanders, legally, logically thinking. Every threat they issued against 45, the weapons of the entire might and full weight of the government to tackle the horrific crisis of human trafficking, and it's happening in the United States, and we don't talk about it. Dark to light, Pisa brings down the house. Now, the whole story is that, we went from Pizzagate to Q to MJ12, even though MJ12 did start posting before Q, but the order is Pizzagate preceded Q, and when I saw that happening online, which I did follow it at the time, I was shocked because there was so much there. I was doing my own digging and research and watching a few videos, and I kind of regret not starting my channel at that time. It would have been completely different, but doing a Pizzagate channel, it was a trend at that time, and they were actually kind of popular. It was starting to explode on the internet. I think it was just after the presidential election, as far as I remember, like start of November 2016, and then we have Q with the Storm and Majestic 12 posting before Q, but their mission will take place after Q with disclosure and first contact. So it's a nice little pattern there of Pizzagate to Q to MJ12. HIV is a political virus weaponized by the Pentagon at the request of Majestic 12 while it was under cabal control. The virus existed beforehand, however, the cure was discovered decades ago. The cure has been classified for national security reasons that could jeopardize Hollywood. Power over the population came from three main angles. 1. Hollywood's propaganda/mind control. 2. News media/fake news. 3. False flags/manufactured dissent/government-sponsored terrorism. It is the belief of government that we have certain duties to perform, good and evil, for the continued assurance that we are the dominant power on the planet. This objective comes at a cost when other countries on the planet are committing worse crimes against their citizens. US government is still by far the best working example of government. It wasn't a mistake. When Majestic 12 was created, we established a connection with Hollywood that would give writers and select people involved in the productions of major franchises access to Magic Eyes Only, unclassified disinformation intended to script a particular narrative to plausibly deny any accusations of any spacecraft civilians may encounter, extraterrestrial aliens abducting American citizens, and more. Those issues were very legitimate, and from a national security perspective, we didn't really have many options. Disclosing ET presence on a planet that was under lock and key control of a very evil race of bloodline families who were all brainwashed and programmed to be suicidal to protect their oppressors at all costs, were not realizing they themselves were the oppressed ones. We couldn't do it then, and we are nearly there now. However, at the time, we had to do things. Movies say, "I've seen some things, man, messed up things." Well, it was a matter of national security. It was a paradox of majestic proportions. Hollywood was weaponized, and the HIV virus and others were used as political weapons to ensure that the trafficking rings within Hollywood disposed naturally of their victims via the virus, AIDS with plausible deniability. If they were snuffed murdered, it was covered up. The virus gave us the ability to control those at the top of the food chain within Hollywood's political structure. We had the cure, and so long as our assets did as we commanded of them, the virus wouldn't turn lethal on them. However, it was as easy as a snap of a finger to kill. The virus gave us the ability to control those at the top of the food chain within Hollywood's political structure. We had the cure, and so long as our assets did as we commanded of them, the virus wouldn't turn lethal on them. However, it was as easy as a snap of a finger to kill. As a lot of new alien-derived technology began to get seeded into the public, Majestic families became heavily involved in acquiring this technology, meeting the different races, and trading information for power and wealth. Some of those families were 322 connected. So while the Majestic 12 created an entity so powerful that government itself would collapse trying to fight it, Majestic families were trying to gain control over that system. History shows you who the financiers were. Many have powerful public relation operations. When Majestic 12 went under cabal control, the weaponization of HIV was introduced into Hollywood, and it became part of an unspoken contract you made between yourself and the devil /ET/cabal members/organization. You knew they would kill you any second they had a chance. This ambiguity gave the cabal and Majestic 12 leverage to do anything and everything under the sun to control and manipulate the actions and words of every powerful talking head on the planet. Yeah, so I'm not going to talk too much about the HIV/AIDS stuff because that's super depressing, but there's a nice line here. So while the Majestic 12 created an entity so powerful that government itself would collapse trying to fight it, I really like that line. Limited space. Projecting dates alters events. Events, not dates, dictate the matrix. Disclosure of what? Disclosure has happened. Cat's out of the bag. The DOJ plus FBI were protecting a transnational child sex trafficking cartel that satanically abused, raped, harvested, etc. While they were doing that, protected from oversight through carefully crafted legalese regarding national security classification, trust issued to classifying authorities. Treason. Majestic 12 required these provisions to protect the secret about ET life until the strength and size and reputation of the Vatican diminished so low that the Holy See will be facing prosecution in the military tribunals for their systematic child abuse scandal that never ends. In the background, we, the Majestic 12, explored space and met many other races, some on Earth. We traded technology, developed partnerships, established diplomatic protocols when dealing with alternative humanoid extraterrestrials in a manner that serves to the fundamental Majestic universal laws of basing all reasoning upon compassion and evidence. We realize and fully understand the gravity of what has happened. We lost control over our own government, and the military did not want to cause mass hysteria and panic because this cartel was too big for us to take on without facing the full weight of the government fighting it. Now, it's the full weight of the government minus the upper ranks and middle ranks of the Justice Department and FBI that need to be purged. Thank you, 45. Disclosure will happen in due course. Understand that we have decades of wrong to right and it doesn't happen overnight. When it does, it always leads to mass hysteria and complete panic. People are way too brainwashed in Mockingbird mind control. We know this. We created it. We can undo it. Trust the plan. So, undoing this matrix, that is the Great Awakening. Now Majestic 12 say how they made the matrix, and the ones, doing this disclosure now, meaning it's a sign of the times about what's going to happen next. The storm and first contact, and I really like this line. We realize and fully understand the gravity of what has happened. We lost control over our own government, and the military did not want to cause mass hysteria and panic because this cartel was too big for us to take on without facing the full weight of the government fighting it. So Majestic 12 basically got out of control, like what they created. Got totally out of control. It was so powerful, like this matrix, and then obviously involvement with the cabal. And then importantly, they mentioned how the Vatican's going to be faced with military tribunals, and how Majestic 12 explored space in the last few decades since 1947 and contacted many extraterrestrial races. That's why they're awesome. Hillary/Obama sold Israel to Iran and got the Russians to help Iran because it would go against American foreign policy. They wanted Iran to nuke Israel. Somebody talked about this recently. We wonder who that could be. Universal moral code is to base on compassion and evidence. However, the Russians did not want nuclear war between Iran and Israel, so Russia used their blackmail on 44/Clinton Foundation to manipulate every foreign policy decision made. In exchange, Russia gained power over key areas the West won from the Soviet Union. This made Russia stronger. They have no interest in nuclear war. However, they do have an interest in playing games with foreign policy to the betterment of their agenda. Players on both sides. Impartial because it is not national security but rather national interest. Since the Clinton Foundation was trying to sell Israel to Iran via Uranium One/Clinton Foundation, Think Ukraine, which would send uranium to North Korea and Iran, Russia wanted a large enough stockpile hand-delivered to them by the Americans to prove they are serious. Russia kept a majority of the uranium sold. North Korea/Iran/ got the remainder. Israel was given very special status after 1947. The Majestic 12 learned about the 50-year warning. We prepared by taking control over the region. When you travel in space, you travel in time. Time is an illusion of environment. As environment changes, time changes. Disinformation campaign was, it will happen. Events, not dates. It will happen implies a date exists. Dates create chaos. Enemy combatant, disinformation. Hillary found out about this intelligence through her Clinton Foundation blackmail portfolio of government agents within NASA, State Department, FBI, DOJ, NSA, Director of National Intelligence, etc., 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 who were participating in the rituals of power, invite only. Many layers of initiation, advanced alien technology used on them. The sinister death cult that Hillary was a high priestess to, who was working with similar ETs to the disinformation extraterrestrial biological entity 3, made it a political priority of the NWO, which was created by a different group of ETs to destroy Earth as the architect's plan originally called for. The NWO group was not the same group as Clinton Foundation, two different goals. Gates Foundation is similar to Clinton Foundation as well as No Name Foundation, John McCain. NWO wanted slaves on a planet that would produce more sacrifices. Clinton Foundation and co-conspirators wanted nuclear war because all of them would survive. Not true. Nobody would. It's happened on Earth before. It's happened on other planets. It's happened on the Moon. It's happened on Venus. Nuclear war always destroys all life on a planet. Always. The Earth is feeling the effects of the nuclear weapons tests conducted in the mid-20th century. The planet's climate is measurably losing control. Why? What are nuclear weapons? Why do ET races forbid the use of nuclear weapons? When humans discovered them, why did ETs visit? Okay, so there's talking about how there's two different parts to the cabal, where one of them, in this case, Clinton Foundation based, wanted nuclear war to kill everyone where they would survive. But Majestic 12 say nobody would survive, the planet would get destroyed. And this happened before on Earth and other planets. And then the other, part of the cabal wanted not nuclear war, but slaves on a planet that would produce more sacrifices. It's a completely different aim or goal, but they were both evil. And, they did mention how Hillary was one of the Majestic 12 at some point, and they were controlling all these departments through blackmail and some of this other stuff about politics I'm not going to talk about because I'm not well versed in that. Rouge actors need money. Clowns in America need help. Your Majesty, please forgive us. Are Rouge actors always bad? What if you needed to carry out your Majesty's majestic work? Excuse the unrelated monarchy references. Majestic work is a sum of respect paid to the king. Sometimes to win a war, one must get their hands dirty. How did the technology get developed that enabled WikiLeaks to pull off what it did shortly after Cabal pulled off 9/11 while we wanted disclosure and the Great Awakening? The Majestic 12 declared war on the Bush Cartel, the Clinton Foundation, the No Name Foundation, and many, many more, because they immediately became a national security risk. Before, they were cockroaches who were feeding on our children, lurking in the dark. The Skull and Bones Society has many dark cult and occult magic in its teachings. It only focuses on worshipping the material realm. In reality, exoconsciousness is a matrix created by our individual aura electromagnetic field that is responsible for projecting physical reality as our consciousness perceives it. The kingdom of heaven sounds glorious, doesn't it? Sounds like something you'd want to spend your life's work to get to. When you get there, what happens? What happens when you've been brainwashed as slaves, and that true kingdom of heaven is actually full awareness of consciousness? The occult magic used by the Skull and Bones Society is it pays respects and tributes to the countless amount of deaths that will inevitably be caused directly by their hands and their decisions. They are taught the magic of power and control. Extreme telepathic connections and empathic links are formed during and after torture. The second consciousness is an energy source. When you worship death, even without actually murdering, you are able to physically drain the soul out of another person. Dementors? Sound is frequency that gives us information. Some sounds can be used to channel this energy using the frequency interference pattern with the victim's consciousness frequency, therefore starting a transfer of energy. Feeding. You realize that through your ability to bring death and despair, you are given privileges that allow you to shape others' reality through your decisions because everybody plays the game. Everybody plays the game because they shop in their stores, they eat at their restaurants, they stay in their hotels, they hide in plain sight. Symbology will be their downfall. Jeffrey Epstein was involved in a transnational child prostitution sex trafficking ring with Clinton Foundation. Many technologies came from the Majestic 12 to make this all possible. We were the group who orchestrated the last 70 years, the good, the bad, and the ugly. This group was in power for thousands of years, operating in plain sight. Before the invasion of Earth, people were free. This criminal enterprise gained control over our vice grip on the government as a means to keep them in power. They feed off you. Why are you playing their game? How do we change the game? The technology used by WikiLeaks to give the Majestic 12 proper insurance against this criminal organization that ceased to control over our government because we actually underestimated them. How can they do what they do? How is it even possible? It breaks your heart when you have to see what some of these kids went through. We are returning power back to we the people, dark to light. With great power comes great responsibility. Majestic, as a quote from Spider-Man. It's the original comic there. Yep, so this thread, Majestic 12 say they were the ones, that is the Majestic 12, who orchestrated the last 70 years, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then there was the Cabal, who existed for thousands of years prior, I think 6,000, they do stay somewhere else. And then that group took control of Majestic 12 and essentially wreaked havoc with 9/11 and other things. It was going to get worse, apparently. But that was prevented, and how we sort of implicated in the sick game, like the Cabal's game, where, why are we participating in it if we don't actually believe in it? So we should not participate in that if we want to break from the system. And this one I really liked. In reality, exoconsciousness is a matrix created by our individual or our electromagnetic field that is responsible for projecting physical reality as our consciousness perceives it. It's talking about the matrix of reality, not like the matrix of illusion of society. It's the other type of matrix that they talk about. And the war on terror, the Bush cartel, as they call it, Clinton Foundation, they could all get implicated in that because it's an ongoing war since, 2001, 20 years on. And these guys are terrorists. And they talk about how important the role that WikiLeaks played in this was for that period of time, like maybe 10 years or more, in the early 2000s and even the 2016 election as well. Majestic message of disclosure. Humans have a tendency while in lower developmental stages of what humans call life to put the unknown onto the shoulders of another. Example, Tesla may have inspired Majestic 12 to do some of our research. Ours was an MKUltra that was CIA. Ours instead focused on those sounds for military applications. We got a lot out of the research. However, as we've said in other medium disclosures, we viewed the CIA as an extension of the KGB, enemy combatants. Do not mistake the work of Majestic 12 with the evils done. Back to example. Tesla, as a person, was no more valuable and worthy to love and be loved. However, his contribution to the Matrix really improved the game experience, for some. However, the information Tesla learned, you can learn. The kingdom of heaven is within. To know what heaven is like, be the wonderment of a child, radiating pure love and light, curiosity, no fear, sponge of information, no judgment, no bias, just love and light. With that, access to the kingdom of heaven, metaphorically speaking. All information exists within and can be downloaded on command. Learn how to communicate with consciousness, and you are majestic and worthy of entry. Think Starfleet. You can access all information inside. Education is not about remembering. It's about getting answers from within, not spiritual or religious questions. Math questions, chemistry questions, physics questions, quantum physics questions, biology questions, DNA/RNA questions. Access to control the brain. Key? All information is within. Meditation and detoxification unlocks information. Trust but verify. Now they're using Tesla as an example of how did he get all the knowledge that he had, scientifically and mathematically. He was basically working alone. Somehow, through meditation and other techniques, he managed to kind of like unlock the keys of science by himself. And they're saying that we can do the same thing and learn, as they say, all information's within, sort of empowering us. That's what they found out, which is true. Like, if Tesla can do it, they're saying that we can do it too. And then talking about how the CIA is evil. It's an extension of the KGB. The Russian, intelligence agency, enemy combatants. That's why they say do not mistake the work of Majestic 12 with the evils done. Majestic message of discussion. We are disclosing vital information about the fundamental structure of society in such a way that would make anybody say, What the hell is that? It has spaceships, and it rapes babies. It's stolen trillions in wealth from us, and has damaged Earth. Military tribunals are part of the plan to purge the Earth from the animals that have lurked in plain sight for decades. And boom, boom, boom. We have the servers. Massive cover-up of widespread criminal activity at the State Department and the Clinton Foundation. 45. Jeffrey Epstein again silenced his victims in court on December 3rd, the day before they were supposed to testify. Why was the case thrown out? Control the flow of information, and you can use damage control. Mockingbird clowns everywhere. Disinformation everywhere. What next? Our collective consciousness needs to prepare to understand what is required of a society to say no more to those crimes. How? The answer is Majestic, if not a direct violation of the Fourth Amendment, if not explicitly used for national security. Mass surveillance. Majestic. Bulk storage. Cabal. Politicization. Cabal. Intelligence logic. Majestic. What if new laws demand that mass surveillance be used to combat against child pornography, manufacturing-related crimes, and other human trafficking caught by AI, that criminal investigations be launched? We the people have the power to create this law. The Majestic 12 cannot create such a law. It must come from the people. With this law, you guarantee the surrender of your privacy and guarantee the safety of your children. In exchange, the Constitution is upheld 100%. Patriots. We live in the world today. However, the threat of mass surveillance from the military is zero. However, from highly political weapons like the DOJ/FBI plus UK/AU assets made them the cabal. What if new laws could be introduced? What if we could make a law that requires NSA mass surveillance to automatically be monitoring all federal employees, and if artificial intelligence detects extreme criminal behavior, child pornography, murder, rape, genocide, classified, etc., weapons development, etc. Executive order could legally create this new government policy that risks being revoked by the next president. We, the people, can use the powers granted upon you by the majestic green frog, Peppy. Meme magic is majestic eyes only, military-grade mind control technology/AI. When what the Clinton Foundation was involved in as to be determined by Huber and Horowitz, how will we, the people, demand these people be held accountable, and how do we prevent it in the future? Everyone, understanding who and what QAnon is, understands a majestic magic. Mass surveillance technology was reverse engineered, or from Magic Eyes Only related off-planet expeditions with multiple extraterrestrial races. Their technology is so advanced that they need AI to monitor the security of every soul in that capacity. Life is a spark of light, the closest that a society can get to being fair, honest, and right-minded towards one another, with legally addressable potential crimes being committed and tracked by military intelligence. What if we can turn the dial on? This goes without saying that the evidence produced by the mass surveillance programs is so conclusive that reasonably straightforward, undeniable evidence would seal tight a classified hearing internally where the agent would be prosecuted. As 45 said today regarding the drug crisis created by the cabal, we're going from no penalty to death penalty as a means to weed this cancer from society. Hollywood always sells the idea of mass surveillance as a bad thing. It is a bad thing for them. Equal application of our laws. Thank you, Justice Kavanaugh. These people are sick. They have no place to walk our streets. 2 tiers of justice. Connected to DOJ/FBI rings equals safe. That's the open secret required among all in the sick game they are playing have. As long as they were in power, they could cover it up completely, and they had to. The rules somehow didn't apply to them. They were never matters of national security. Why? Why? Why wouldn't the definition of national security include child sex trafficking and to use the might and force of the entire US plus majestic militaries to fight? Has that changed recently? Rats everywhere. Dark to light. Dark to light. Now this thread is talking about using mass surveillance to prosecute criminal activity so that it doesn't get too extreme and we lose privacy but gain more protection in exchange, so it's a trade-off. And it's one of the better uses of mass surveillance technology because they mention it's used by other extraterrestrial races on other planets. And just because of like this horrific situation that we have with the crime going on in the world and the corruption, that we don't want this to happen again. It seems to be seeded, like this technology, so that something like this can take place with the mass surveillance, which has been painted in bad light by Hollywood and, Edward Snowden, but it's not actually that bad. It depends how it's used. Transparency and trust are essential to creating a personal relationship with other life forms. National security apparatuses created by US government serve the purposes of making the military the most lethal on the planet. In your own home, you're okay with one or more persons to interact with you in meaningful ways while you're naked or having a bowel movement, right? They hear your conversations as we hear. They smell what you smell. They are present in the room with you as you speak. No matter where, national security technology, when coupled with the original interpretation of the Constitution, can be combined. Should private corporations like Facebook, Google, Twitter be forced to surrender data that compromises national security? Yes, Constitution allows. However, the primary reason why people mistrust this Majestic technology is because with Majestic technology, it uses consciousness to manifest. You choose who to use it, for good or for evil. For a long period of time, powerful criminals use this technology to stay in power. With great power comes great responsibility. Very Majestic statement disclosed. If full transparency and criminal liability is enforced for all abuses to FISA, which were systematically used against national security interests, but rather for political enemies, you too would fear it. The cabal fears transparency because of their criminality. The violation of our privacy was done with the powers of the gods, extraterrestrial intelligence beyond the organic development of life on Earth, without looking inward for answers about the unknown void of reality. Mass surveillance is a sensitive subject since the weapon was heavily abused by the cabal. The technology was majestic. When zero-point energy is disclosed, we must be able to guarantee 100% safety. All life on Earth could be wiped out with the level of knowledge contained in zero-point energy. Disclosure is an apocalypse of new information about a new physics, a new level of consciousness, new technology all connected to our conscious matrix of vibrational energy that has real tangible power to manifest positive reality is coming soon to a theater near you. Understanding who and what our past has been is essential to preventing it from happening again in the future. We don't dwell on remembering the past, but we do it long enough to rise global consciousness to be fully aware of the horrific violations of humanity that allowed our defeat in the first place. The reason why we as a civilization was set up to fail was because we were never properly guided in the first place. Modern mainstream religions are all death cults involved in horrific crimes against humanity. As we have said, we will destroy Christianity into a million pieces and expose it for what it really is: the good, the bad, and the ugly. Parts are very real and true. Others are why you are slaves. You must wake up or face complete destruction. The military is charged with that. It has reached a critical point where the root cause of the problems we face as a civilization is fixable and within our reach simply because of the unrealized mass power that mass surveillance and social media plus Majestic internet can really manifest. Right, so they're talking about how we're ready for what's going to go down with the mass surveillance, it's the Q team, plus social media, so we can spread the news, and the internet as well. You can see what's going on and how our civilization wasn't protected for thousands of years, because the previous civilizations had already perished, basically, and there wasn't like a global protection like the Space Force is bringing now. And, mass surveillance against the cabal, that's like their worst nightmare. That's going to lead to their prosecution in military tribunals, and that's Majestic technology. Anyone claiming to have foreknowledge of the specific events leading up to the military tribunals is intentionally attempting to subvert the plan. Now that we prepare for what's next in 2019, Q is mainstream and public unacknowledged by mockingbird clowns. Everybody knows. We can detect through our technology that over 200 million people domestically inside the United States are actively aware of QAnon. Less than 50% read daily, and less than that believe anything will happen. Disclosure is projected for 2019. It will not be anything close to first contact, but Antarctica will make a presence in early 2019. Time is an illusion, as we have stated many times prior, so that is why we use projected. Learn the occult magic. Consciousness manifests randomly whenever more than one conscious mind is actively focused on the same frequency and tension of thoughts, combined with sound and meditation. You have more than you know. WWG1WGA means we share our conscious awareness together and unite as one. Through the Majestic 12's slow disclosure, after Cabal took control and were purged from the military as official programs, we prepared humanity for this point in time. The technology, the instant communication devices, the extremely complex classified technologies, The Cabal was inside the Majestic 12 for a period of time. Once classified first contact took place, it was forced upon the Majestic 12 to move this group out of the military and inferred, but Cabal chose to ignore that these programs would stop altogether. Once the Majestic 12 explained the circumstances of planetary politics between rivaling nations from raw military intelligence analysis, we received advice on how to win against the entities who are directly responsible for child sex trafficking and the occult knowledge disclosed in exchange. Like we have said before, this group was in power for thousands of years. How do you destroy an enemy that large without destroying Earth or forcing everyone through force to conform in a specific way? Ever wonder how humans in SG-1 under Jaffa/Gold control live? Haunting. So please understand that nobody with foreknowledge or inside knowledge of the specific events leading up to the tribunals is speaking in the best interests in allowing that conscious manifestation to form without being punted down the road because of moves and counter moves. So we don't know how the tribunals are going to come about, and it's already happened in a different way to how we thought or expected. I cover this kind of thing like the near-term plan in my videos about the news. Not really so much in this video. This one's about the bigger picture, but they're talking about how the Cabal, Skull and Bones existed for thousands of years, and the only way to defeat them was by, giving them mass surveillance technology, and, they incriminated themselves with it by getting blackmail on their victims. And this one's interesting. They seem to communicate with some extraterrestrial races on how to defeat the Cabal. And I'm not sure if the mass surveillance idea was the answer, but it's one of them, They talk about the occult knowledge, so I'm not sure what that is. But yeah, the takedown of the Cabal is just like this, 70 to 90 year plan. That's how hard it is, but they managed to do it, which is impressive. Like, I would think, how would you defeat a massive satanic cult or multiple satanic cults? You would need hard evidence, so they seem to be poised to present that evidence now that they have it. Q team, that is. Majestic message of disclosure. We are not saying this account has any connections to Q, so please stop spreading disinformation/misinformation pertaining to this account. We do discuss extraterrestrials, consciousness, and aliens, including but not limited to occult numerology, magic, and majestic operations. Q is an entirely separate operation, as we have repeated dozens or so times. MJ12 operates above the federal government's bureaucracy because of the severity of the classification pertaining to ongoing ET-related operations. Q is Earth-based only, MJ12 is not. Q does not equal MJ12, MJ12 does not equal Q. Therefore, since MJ12 is not only based with operations on Earth, but also other planets in the solar system and moons, we therefore have a wide range of tools accessible only to us to use, and whether people can comprehend it or not, we chose Twitter to communicate over 8chan. MJ12 has never asked you to not read Q posts, follow advice that Q has given you, or tried to misrepresent information Q has posted, nor will we ever on this account. We beg you, if you do not care to read the information we are sharing, then please simply block our account. Divide and conquer is real, and people have been so conditioned to teams, and whose side you are on, and is my side winning or not, that it prevents legitimate conversations to be had about extremely important subjects. We are here to guide humanity through the disclosure process. Not to disclose the process itself, that's Q's role, mutually exclusive operations, one coming directly from the federal government, another originating from off-planet. Same goal, the ET race that invaded Earth, that has been feeding on our children must stop. Great awakening. Yep, so just saying how, Q is operating from the federal government and Majestic 12's operating above the federal government off-planet. And again, talking about prosecuting the Cabal, how we are divide and conquered, just generally talking about Q, how they're different operations, not the same. Though I do suspect there's some people on both teams, that's how they kind of get around the problem of transferring information between each group. And this is a good summary here, saying how we do discuss extraterrestrials, consciousness, and aliens, including but not limited to occult numerology, magic, and majestic operations. So definitely not what Q talks about. That's what I like about their account there on Twitter, since I found it at the end of 2018. Been covering it since July 2019. Majestic message of disclosure. Consider the following scenario and reflect on what feels true to you, and then respond. Was the USA a nation that defended all human beings equally under the law in 1946? Civil rights movements? Purpose? USA became a majestic nation in 1947. What defines an American citizen? Values, nationality, patriotism, volunteer, selfless, determined, entrepreneur, wealthy, free, independent, alien, majestic. Disclosure was planned by the domain all along. SG1 seeded your consciousness with this reality. The time in which disclosure takes place is only at the point in which the society will be able to get along with everyone through legal principles that all people equally share. Think about the events unfolding within the Chinese government and military right now. Talk about full disclosure. Some are panicking. Trump has given Xi his word. Majestic nations respect what it means to be an American citizen as well as a Chinese citizen, etc. Many nations' identity is determined by race, religion, language, ethnicity, etc. The USA is different. It is a melting pot of personal potential limited by one's own mind themselves. Many work hard to suppress your true powers. Trust yourself. Facts matter. Truth resonates inside. The USA is founded on equal application of our laws for all people. What happens when other nationalities are threatening our national security, but the governments of those countries refuse to acknowledge their associations? Limited information. Disinformation. China has its own history of child abuse. Its laws allow it. Our laws prohibit it on our own soil or on our own citizens. The programs are being operated inside the USA that China knows about and will willingly release only for political gamesmanship and not safety of all people speak. Think of the world as a melting pot of types of humans, all types, all varieties, all characters, good, evil, white, black, good, evil, smart, dumb, clones, avatars, synthetic, AI. Each denomination originally started as tribal gatherings, so you were told, naturally, right? You are friendly with those you interact with on a daily basis, but when greeted with something completely unknown to you, you are faced with a fight or flight instinctual response. This is why trust yourself matters. Facts matter. Tribalism is common among humans. Lower consciousness. We are all one means simply that we all love as one and we all fear as one. Each person has equal potential relative to the ISB's avataric genetic makeup/conscious strength. Only through looking inward do you enhance your consciousness. External personification of God and Jesus have you looking away from the truth to your consciousness. We did not make the graphic. Some disinformation contained, but general concept is correct and details are classified. Earth must adopt a legal standard akin to the United States and respect children, elderly, the weak, the vulnerable, and the abused by removing the harm from their environment to the best of humanity's ability. Unfortunately, when sheep are sleeping, wolves feed. The issues in China are all about the dark side of the moon. Pink Floyd, is anybody in there? Just nod if you can hear me. Is there anyone home? Moon? Spaceship? DEFCON 2? 1? US unchanged. Why? The civil rights movement was majestic. The world is watching. The world will learn the truth. Where we go one, we go all as majestic. In order to peacefully disclose ET life, the domain wants to guarantee that human rights will be respected worldwide first. The Majestic 12 had a mission impossible that included letting a legal replacement be implemented worldwide to end the global war crises based on economic trade, national identity, equal rights for all people, and then, and only then, can first contact take place. The world is changing. Dr. Light. Yeah, so they're talking about the qualities that make America special, and contrasting that with China, that their government has got some serious issues, not really the people, but the Chinese Communist Party. And we'll go on to the next one. Majestic message of disclosure. Allow us to connect a few dots that will undoubtedly only reinforce the tinfoil wrapped around your head pertaining to chemtrails. The truth is more bizarre than we will go into here, but this is a 100,000-foot view of the situation. Chemtrails is a term used to describe heavy metals and other particulates being expelled into the upper atmosphere by military and civilian aircraft. The purposes of chemtrails has been heavily classified, with plenty of whistleblowers who spread misinformation and disinformation on the subject to keep you divided and conquered. Logical thinking is required. Truth resonates internally, and therefore MJ12 proofs are moot. Message over messenger, Stargate SG1, Season 1, Episode 8, Brief Candle explored the idea of nanotechnology that could change the illusion of time pertaining to the aging equation artificially. How did that episode disclose how nanotechnology is sustained in the body? A frequency was being emitted that directly controlled the dial for time in the aging process. What was that frequency? It wasn't disclosed as it is highly classified. Sam said something key about nanotechnology's ability to reproduce. They take heavy metals from around the body and use them to make more of the nanotechnology after the life cycle of the bot has expired. Why does the military spray heavy metals into the air? DARPA has been researching and developing nanotechnology for the body, specifically for military applications, though only 0.01% of these types of programs are unclassified. Vaccines are the medium used to inject these nanotechnology devices into your body. What is voice of God? Why are vaccines shrouded with disinformation and misinformation pertaining to their effectiveness and efficiency? What have we told you about disinformation/misinformation? Yeah, so they're talking about how everyone's implanted by nanotechnology via vaccines, and that those vaccines are like fed with heavy metals to kind of sustain them and stop them from dying out. Got the chemtrails in the air. Could be one of the reasons for that. And yeah, this is just deep rabbit hole with the nanotechnology and what else it does. Even they're talking about affecting aging, and yeah, it's just crazy stuff, man. And also one thing, they do say that they'd make disclosures through voice of God technology, which would be, this nanotechnology is implanted, meaning they can sort of communicate one way to anybody. And I think they gave J.K. Rowling as an example of that, like through Harry Potter in the series. She got some like inspirations from voice of God. Working hand in hand to return control back to the American people. The scientific research that was classified and never brought to market was intentionally done. Trade laws must be tightened, and China must stop intellectual property theft trade violations. We have unleashed America from the bondage it once had under past administrations, and are instead, regardless of political party, addressing issues of concern for all Americans. We have everything. We know what needs to happen. You are not alone. Full disclosure is happening. In time this will happen. Human trafficking is a major worldwide humanitarian crisis, and basing trade deals on equal human rights for all, including children. We will enforce our trade laws with sanctions that cripple nations, death by 1,000 cuts. The new technology that will be coming out will be protected at first, while the rest of the world cleans itself up. Military will return home and defend the homeland from economic theft that make our sanctions effective in order to give other nations a choice. The choice shall become, adopt the Majestic principles of equal human rights as fundamental requirements of trade. If you rape and murder children, sorry, you can go suck on a lemon. Doesn't mean we declare war. But sanctions can cripple offending nations. Look at Iran. Citizens of these countries will have a choice. Do we allow government that abuses children in some of the most horrific ways to trade with the United States? We offer, in exchange of trade negotiations, access by allowing our businesses to be established in your country. New technology. You think Silicon Valley has anything cool? Give me a break. It's called Silicon Valley. Everything they are doing is because of the US government. Lousy politicians who sold out our country. New trade deals. New technology. Full disclosure will not happen outside of classified realms until the humanitarian crisis of serious human rights abuses worldwide end completely and irreversibly. Wait until you see what was in Kim's letter. Look at what I just announced about the Space Force. If rockets were flying everywhere and I said what I said, we'd be in a very different country right now, let me tell you that. Strings cut. Clans are out. We're done with them. The manner in which other countries will gain access to our technology will be through trade only. We are willing to offer food replication technology in the not-too-distant future as a new cutting-edge technology to curb worldwide hunger. Countries who show willingness to work with the United States to end the horrific crimes against humanity that have been taking place, they should be granted trading access for this technology. These companies want to sell products in your countries, and we want those products to be made here in the United States. We have great potential. This is the Great Awakening. National emergency will not happen yet. Watch. Learn. Yeah, so just talking about preparations for first contact, essentially, and such a complex process. They got to reestablish law and order worldwide, and, there's countries that are resisting that, hostile to the United States, essentially, and, questioning how they're going to deal with that. Reread past drops. Here's the 40,000-foot view. Majestic 12 was created as a result of Roswell. Cover story. Operation Paperclip was the reason. The task of Majestic 12 was to conceal the extraterrestrial presence on Earth for reasons of national security. In late 1988, Majestic 12 reformed in an effort to bring the alien presence out into the open. Therefore, disclosure programs were created, and members of the Majestic 12 were labeled such as MJ1, MJ2, etc., to keep anonymity even among eyes-only classification settings. Majestic 12 has active operations ongoing in the United States from DIA assets, using social media tools like Anonymous Official and this account to disclose vital information about the Majestic reality that exists. This account is a conduit to 3 members' operations. QAnon is a separate NSA operation, but where there's one, there's 100, all for different purposes, all playing hyperdimensional chess. Welcome to reality. However, the nature of reality is not as you were taught. An alt physics in classified programs exists that MJ12 has declassed, meaning process of actual declassification of information pertaining to whether the secret is only present in order to protect criminality. This is why we operate 300 clicks away from the subject, but at a tactical advantage over everything else without raising too much suspicion. I call it the Great Awakening. So yeah, more MJ12 history and saying how they were formed to conceal the extraterrestrial presence on Earth for reasons of national security. That was like their original mandate, and that changed over time. They mentioned that Anonymous channel, Anonymous Official. It's an interesting channel if you want to check that out on YouTube. Quite a lot of subscribers and stuff, so there's people interested in this kind of information for sure. Alex Jones is not a black hat. He is paying the price of his choices as acknowledged. Alex Jones is a grey hat. Money talks. He rides on a very fine line that is weaponized against him by Operation Mockingbird. They created their enemy, groomed since a child. Cross-reference SG-1, Majestic 12. It is as sinister as it sounds. What these people didn't realize, that when the technology that came directly from Majestic 12/Working Group/Pentagon, that it collected everything by design, because dealing with some of the enemies of Majestic 12 means controlled disinformation. This allowed us to mass collect the data being collected by the intel community and DIA/NSA and identify the network behind these organizations. Through controlled disinformation campaigns, coupled with mind control propaganda when mixed with drugs, amplifies the matrix. However, the solution is not to unplug from the reality, but rather to find the courage within to change it. Everybody has a choice between good and evil. Many people have lost sight of the innocence of humanity, while others are harvesting the biological entities to enhance. Greed is a major issue. Certain races are stereotypically identified as being motivated by greed are actually motivated by the interdimensional drug experiences that throw your consciousness into total chaos outside of your control. Think Genesis. Greed drives evil in the world. Greed is making it expensive to be poor and cheap to be in debt to others, inflated on this fiat currency controlled by occult, satanic, multi-themed child cannibal sacrifices. Everybody knows it is evil, yet nobody has the courage to stand up. Historically, the race in question are a race controlled by people who are true cowards about their own existence and responsibility to the exo-consciousness of the reality. This race must realize that the traditions and history of their people is controlled propaganda to keep the species alive. Power wins. These visionaries became the Majestic 12 type of consciousness. However, the intentions of those actions must always be evaluated. As stated before, you are a commodity to them. They do not value the third dimension of reality because technically death is an illusion. However, when your life is ended because you are able to ascend into the permanent higher vibration to simply exist forever, possibly choosing to re-enter to re-experience, you are incrementally improving generation over generation in search for the truth of their oneness and what it means to be God, as Alex Jones explained on 27th of February 2019. This consciousness is energy and is what this account has been talking about since before Q became a thing. The Majestic 12 have been everywhere. There is so much disinformation in the world. What is real? The power to will and manifest physical reality by learning the codes, the keys to the castle, the magic spells, whatever you want to call it. You can name it anything you want. Doesn't matter to me. Understanding this power means that you can either use your consciousness to inadvertently be responsible for allowing the manifestations of child cannibalism being rampant in the highest ranks of the Catholic Church and thousands of banking and investment executives. The ladder is high. It goes deep underground. Understand this. The world is changing. The world is watching. So that was the last thread, talking about how we have this choice that we can make and how to go about it. Yeah, just talking about the darkness in the world. And I think that it should start to make sense to you, like this whole picture after this video. It was a bit hard, like coming up with this idea. So I compiled these threads at the beginning of when Majestic 12 started posting that I haven't covered on my channel. I've covered some of the tweets, but not everything here. The threads after this time, the longer threads, a lot of them, or most of them, I've actually covered in my videos. And that's why I decided to make this one, is because these were threads that I haven't covered before, especially like collecting them all together for like newer viewers and stuff in one place, even, you know, if they just watch this video and the 100,000 foot video as an introduction to Majestic 12. This particular video was Majestic 12 in their own words, and you can see how good these long threads are, where they explain so much, and it's different to like one single tweet where like, oh yeah, it's a really nice tweet and super deep, but then it's a whole different thing when you read these threads that are like 30 tweets long or longer than that. And I really enjoyed reading them out. Some of them were real tongue twisters, like some of the tweets were really hard to narrate actually. And, you know, just talking for 2 hours, my voice is pretty much gone. But anything in the nearer term about the plan that goes on, I cover in different videos. Like, those things are not for this series. This series is about the bigger picture and all the Majestic 12 tweets that I haven't covered yet, and sort of like trying to go through their account in an organized fashion, you know, basically by theme or subject, more or less. You know, it started here with like the bigger picture and several recurring themes and subjects. And, you know, after these 2 videos, like in this series, I think it should make sense to you, even though it's, you know, full of paradoxes, like about their history, Majestic 12 and their organization. And it's just like, it can be hard to understand at first. I did try to explain it. I didn't want to like, you know, dominate the threads because they're mostly self-explanatory. I said a small amount, I think, you know, maybe it's just about right, like how much I talked about myself in my explanations in this video. But yeah, I hope you liked it. I'll have to come up with an idea for the next video in this series. Otherwise, I'll continue on with anything else that happens in the news and other videos. Thanks for watching, guys. WWG1, WGA.